Make it happen, Captain.
What's that?
Make it happen, Captain.
Yeah, there you go.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Hutchinson City Council meeting for Tuesday, January 24th, 2023. We'll call the meeting to order. Approve council agenda and any agenda additions or corrections.
Mayor, Council, I don't have any additions or corrections for you.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Tim, second by Dave to approve the agenda. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Invocation is from Hunters Ridge Community Church. Good evening.
Hi. Hope everybody's doing well. Good evening to the council, you bet. Well, let's take a moment to pause and focus and put our direction on the Lord here. So let's pray together. Dear Lord, God, your word, the Bible tells us that you are King of Kings, and it is you who appoint all government leaders. In fact, there is no authority except from God. Our greatest hope must be in you, but it is important that I pray for our leaders and especially for our Hutchinson City Council this evening. Thank you for them, Father. Thank you for our mayor, and thank you for all of the representatives that are here and some that may not be here as well. Lord, I ask that you give them wisdom, make them effective, protect their well-being. It can be a difficult and sometimes thankless job. But I just pray that their work and they would fulfill their roles well. Protect our community, serve this community, give them insight into the needs of this community. I thank you for them, Lord. Lord, I want to pray too. I typically do this, but just want to pray for our police and pray for our firefighters, pray for our first responders and the challenges that they face in our world today and perhaps even in our own community. And so, God, we just submit this to you now, and that you would guide and direct the thoughts of this council meeting tonight. I pray in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Thank you.
Next is Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Recognition of gifts, donations, and community service to the city. Does anybody have anything tonight? All right, we have a couple of resolutions underneath that. We have resolution number 15558, resolution accepting $500 donations from Heartland Ag Systems for Fireman's Park project. And we have resolution number 15559, resolution accepting a $100 donation from Russell and Lorraine Erickson to the Hutchinson Police Department for the Law Enforcement Memorial Park Fund. We have resolution number 15560, a resolution accepting $7,700 from various donors for the Shady Ridge Park project.
I'll make a motion to approve all three.
Second.
Motion by Chad, second by Dave to approve all three resolutions. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Say, Mayor, before we maybe move on, I'd like to just take a moment to introduce our new Public Works Director. We have Mike Stifter is in attendance. Mike can come on up. This is your time to get in front of the TV and the audience. So I'll let him introduce himself to you. But Mike started actually last Tuesday, and so I know the council always likes to obviously meet our new staff, and this is a pretty important position, so I wanted to get him in front of the council and introduce himself and that of the public. So I can tell. I didn't tell him about this part, I just said.
I'll let Mr. Mayor comment, so, no, Ms. Mayor and Council, appreciate the opportunity and really look forward to the opportunity. I knew I was getting into a good situation by moving back to the area I grew up, originally from Silver Lake. And, but excited to be back in the area. It's been about 35 years, coming from a very similar role with the city of River Falls, Wisconsin, and came back to be again closer to family and for what again looks to be a great opportunity here, and been pleasantly surprised, as they said, getting a good situation, but it's been even better than expected. So, but yeah, came back for week 2. It's been going very well. Staff have been gracious. As I think you all know, you have a very good staff, very talented city administrator, and great staff around. So, very glad to be a part of that situation. So,
Absolutely, welcome.
thank you.
Well, you forgot to say that you have an extraordinary council.
Oh, all right. We'll find that out tonight, I suspect.
I thought we went over that when we visited.
Here, this is the first time I met you guys, though.
So I actually stopped and had a long conversation with Mike this afternoon, so kind of reminiscing about the old days over at Silver Lake when I coached over there, and he played football on the state football team, and yeah, so.
And we still hired him at Hutchinson.
Yeah,
too.
I know.
Yeah,
Wow.
still hired, exactly.
I know they didn't beat Hutch.
Okay.
You know, if you could hire a kid from Delano to be city administrator, a kid from Silver Lake at least had a chance, so, yeah. So, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Next is public comment. If you want to address the council, please keep it to 5 minutes and just come up and introduce yourself and name and address. Yeah.
She wants me to come up with her because we have.
Yep, sure.
Yep.
See, my name's Pam Wagner, and I live at 565 Lakewood Drive in Hutchinson. And I have a problem with snow removal. Not snow removal, plowing in front of my road. The plow comes down McDonald Drive, takes a right, and all of that on McDonald Drive goes into my driveway. When they go by, it's like 4 feet high. And my neighbors have all tried to help me, and they put in so much work, and they said, we just can't do it. The snowplow is putting too much in front of your driveway. And I've hired people with pickups that have blades. They've given up on it. I finally have hired someone that has a big business, and he's doing it for me, but it's $500 a month. And so I want there to be a different way. I've lived in my house for 36 years, and no matter how much snow we get, any winter, this is the case. It doesn't matter if it's an average winter, this is just the case. So I need help, and there has to be a different way of plowing the roads that it all doesn't go in my driveway. And I have great neighbors. They've all tried to help me, and they can't. And they've all come to me and said, I would never put up with this. I don't see how you can do it.
Pam, what was your address again?
565 Lakewood Drive. I'm on the corner of McDonald Drive and Lakewood on the right-hand side.
I think we can all look into it and see what, this isn't anything we want to hear. I mean, we look for a solution for sure.
Can I
Yeah,
speak?
sure.
My name is Carol Johnson. I live at 550 Lakewood Drive and across the street. And I have been here for 10 years. This is my 10th winter. And I would attest that what she says is true. Because even though you have, you're on a corner, and really the corner person ends up paying more taxes than anybody else, but she has this issue because when they come around, they pile, everything that's on that short street between Roberts Road, and it comes right around and it's right in front of her house. And she has two driveways that she should be having to plow out, but she's only plowing out one, and it's still up to your waist. And it has been so bad that my husband said he couldn't do it anymore. He was trying, we were out there shoveling for hours, just trying to open up her driveway along with ours and some of the other neighbors. She's a widow. She's 70 years old. She can't even run the snow blower herself, so she has no choice but to pay for somebody or get somebody to do this or have volunteers. But what I was concerned about too was when she asked for assistance from the city, they came and they pushed all the snow into her yard, up to her tree, almost into the house. And she has rocks and stuff out there with landscaping that looked like they were hit. And then they were, and she just got a new sprinkler system or irrigation system put in last year, and I'd be surprised if it wasn't ruined by the way that was done. So the reason I came was I was so appalled by what was done with pushing that snow up into her yard.
Couple things, let me address that, because I talked with staff about it. First off, we did push it too far back, but, we're supposed to keep it within the right of way, and that's something we've talked about with staff and acknowledged it was a little too far. Secondly, it was done to try to alleviate the problem, because when we've had, I think Johnson, in a 10-day period, we had 40 inches of snow. And so as that snow piles, we run into issues on where it can get pushed to. And so one of the goals is if you try to push that back from the curb, it allows more room for that to pile up. And so, but we did push it a little too far, and that's something that we'll talk with our staff about. And if there is a damaged sprinkler system that's outside of the right of way, that if it was done by us, that'd be something we would have to cover. But I would just also acknowledge too that if it's in the right of way, that's part of what the right of way is for, is to pile the snow in those areas. That's why we've got built-in right of ways throughout the entire city. I think we can look at it. It's a conversation that we can have as staff. I just want to forewarn the council and the public. I could probably take almost every property owner in town, and they would ask us to plow the snow different than the way than we do right now. And that's the challenge. There's only a couple ways that you can do it, which in some point or another, it's not going to make somebody happy. And so that's the challenge that we have. I'm not saying that we can't take a look at it. Something potentially couldn't be considered for doing something different. But there is a challenge, especially when you've had as much snow as we've had this past year. So
this is every year.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had a sump pump break because of them pushing snow in my yard and pushing it all in my yard. Then I had to pay for all new carpet and everything. And I don't see them pushing it into other people's yards.
Oh, they do.
Well, they went way up to my oak tree and
Yep, and it was too far.
And I don't want them pushing it into my yard, because then when the spring comes, my sump pump breaks. And there is another way to plow that road.
Well, I've seen the last couple of years that it seems like every other time it seems like they'll come around and they'll go take a left and go down Lakewood and then come back and do the cul-de-sac afterwards. And it seems like there's not by that time, the snow is kind of dispersed out, so it's more even with the plowing.
Well, ladies, like Matt said, the staff will look at it and see if they can remedy it. But
Okay.
I know they've
Appreciate your
been
time.
out there a few times, and so thanks for coming. Thank you. All right, moving on, we have approval of minutes. We have,
Oh, sure.
I have complained about this before, and I was told by John that that's what I get for living on the corner. I have rights too. People that live on corners have rights. I pay my taxes.
ma'am, we're gonna try to remedy it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Alrighty, we have the regular meeting minutes of January 10th, 2023.
Make a motion to approve them.
Second.
Okay, second by Tim to approve the minutes. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Consent agenda. This will be done by one motion unless somebody pulls something off for discussion. A is approval of the 2023 City of Hutchinson Pay Equality Report. We have B is approval of issuing temporary liquor license to the McLeod County Agricultural Association on February 25th, 2023 at the McLeod County Fairgrounds. C is approval of issuing short-term gambling license to the 3M Club from March 1st through April 30th, 2023. And D is claims appropriation and contract payments. Anything want to hold off?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Chad, second by Pat to approve the consent agenda as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. We do not have a public hearing. Communications, requests, and petitions. We have the Creekside year-end report. Mr. Andy, how are you this evening?
We are just fine. How about you?
Good, good.
Good. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and for those in the audience or maybe on the council who don't know who I am, Andy Kosak. I manage the operations out at Creekside. Here tonight to give you hopefully a brief recap of the 2022 happenings out at Creekside. Let me get started here. So I think, as most people know, the Creekside operations are made up of two operating funds, the refuse fund and the compost fund. So I typically like to start out with the mission statement, and I won't read it line by line, but the first two sentences do drive home, and we adhere to them day in, day out, and they play a significant role in many of the decisions that are made on a day-to-day basis. So Creekside will provide an environmentally responsible alternative to disposing of city and county organics from area landfills. This will be done in a manner that is self-sustaining and provides optimal benefits, economic and otherwise, to the residents of Hutchinson. And like I said, that's something that we've stood true to for as long as I can remember, back since the facility was built and initially opened. So tonight I'll start out with the refuse fund, and just to kind of give a little bit of a definition of what the refuse fund is all responsible for. Through the refuse fund, the city charges its residents a monthly garbage fee for the collection and disposal of municipal solid waste, otherwise known as MSW, or just trash garbage, and the source separated organic material, otherwise referred to as SSOM. The garbage fees collected from residents are then used to pay the contracted hauling and collection services for both MSW and the SSOM, the landfill disposal charges for the MSW, the expenditures for the source separated operations, which include building improvements and capital equipment purchases. There's not a lot of glory necessarily to report on in terms of both of these departments. We're essentially handling solid waste and managing solid waste. So just looking at it from the waste stream side of things and the tonnages produced or received collected over the years, 2022 ended on with just shy of 2,400 tons of garbage being collected and disposed of at the landfill down in Biskie, Spruce Ridge landfill. The green line there shows the incoming tonnages that are tipped at Creekside for the source separated organics material. And as you can see, that's been on a relatively steady decline here prior to 2015. So many of you are aware of the grant project that we were awarded, the grant funding that we were awarded here last year. That project did get underway in May of 22. Long-term project expected to wrap up in 25, but the goal behind that project is to increase participation and decrease contamination. Contamination's been a big issue for us for as long as I can remember, and there really hasn't been a solid, valid effort on a regular basis to really try to mitigate that. So hopefully between this grant project and then I'll mention it here later on, but the addition of another position, a full-time position within the refuse fund as a public outreach and education coordinator, we can really get somebody to spearhead their responsibilities and keep their fingers on that end of the aspect. So just speaking of contaminants, here's a few examples. I don't know how well they really show up here on the screen, but a lot of what we see is common. This upper left just shows the pots from potted plants you were to buy at a garden center, Menards, where have you. You know, in most cases, there's usually soil and a dead plant in them, so I don't know if people are simply confused and they just throw the whole thing, or if it's lazy, or what the case, but that's pretty common. A lot of other things is just plastic films, which is shown here in this picture. And in most cases, like especially this picture down on the bottom left, them filled with a food waste of sorts. Perfectly clean food waste, but they're in a plastic bag, not a compostable bag that the city has available to its residents. Some of the other things that we've seen here is a machete and sheath. Picture doesn't necessarily, I guess the bottle kind of puts it into perspective, but that was a good sized machete. The upper right here shows a cooling fan. That's not one of your desktop models. That's a better 2-3 foot diameter size fan. And then Christmas lights. You know, anything corded. We see a lot of Christmas lights obviously around this time of year as residents take things down. Extension cord, bad garden hoses. In a lot of cases, we try to pick any of this stuff out before it gets processed, but in a lot of cases, it makes its way into the processing system and basically just wreaks havoc on everything. Gets wrapped up in equipment, gets wrapped up in other organic material, and just creates these big balls of organic matter that we can't process. It's just not worth our while to try to break down. So the whole ball goes into the dumpster and heads to the landfill. So again, kind of going back to the grant project, we needed to establish a baseline contamination rate. So in June of 22, we picked 2 weeks. This was the first week, and basically went through and each day separated 2 skid loader buckets worth of organics that the truck tipped for that day, spread it out on the floor. A handful of staff members, myself included, gloved up and literally went through by hand and separated everything out into these categories to really determine where we're at. So, without going through everything in detail, we range anywhere from just under 3% contamination on the Thursday route to the mid-8% on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, and the Friday route took the cake at a 15, just shy of a 15.5% contamination. And these numbers stood pretty true for the second week as well. So, just kind of putting things into perspective, on that Friday route of the 18,480 pounds that were tipped and using the 15.5% contamination rate, if that stood true throughout that entire range, just shy of 2,900 pounds is essentially contamination that ends up in the landfill. And furthermore, I mean, as far as this contamination goes, I mean, this is down to, you know, the actual material. The problem we have is as the material gets processed, plastic bags, glass, what have you, gets shredded into a billion little pieces. Maybe not a billion, but a lot. So as we screen it out, those rejects materials are not salvageable. You know, in a lot of cases, if this contamination didn't exist, we would be able to recycle them those rejects back into the system to get them to break down further. Well, there's really no hope in trying to save this. So all of that material just is essentially ended up sent to the landfill and out of sight, out of mind. So from a financial perspective, the refuse fund is pretty steady, Eddie, and pretty safe, pretty stable fund, pretty stable operation, coming in just under $1.4 million in year-end revenues. Year-end expenditures came in just over 1.6 million, significantly below what was budgeted, and I'll get into that a little bit later, where $2.6 million was budgeted in expenditures for 22. I'd just like to point out that the year-end expenditures are all in. That includes depreciation, the capital outlay, and the transfer out. So from a cash flow perspective, it's still it's in a healthy situation. The transfer out, the $55,000, that's been happening since 2010. That goes into the Tree Disease Infestation Mitigation Fund, and since then, the fund has contributed $660,000 to that fund. Any questions at this point on refuse before I jump into compost? All right. So here too, just the other side of the operations. just the definition of the compost fund and what it's all responsible for. The Creekside's compost fund serves as a drop-off site for compostable and recyclable materials such as logs, brush, yard waste, and clean concrete and blacktop at no charge to both residents and contractors. With these materials, Creekside produces, markets, and distributes bulk and bagged compost mixtures, as well as a variety of bulk and bagged colored mulches to local customers and distributors with a current sales territory of 13 states from the Midwest to the Intermountain West. And I think hopefully most of you know that Creekside sells under the three labels of Splendor Grow, which is our economy series, the Creekside brand, which is the what we consider the premium or the mid-tier, and then the Wonder Blend, which is considered the professional grade. Creekside also supplies horticultural materials along with aggregates when they are available to the various city departmental projects at a reduced cost. So jumping into the operations, I guess on the front side of the operations of the compost fund with the incoming materials, that's been, as the graph shows, pretty steady over the recent years, aside from the anomaly in 2018. Just shy of 13,300 tons of just yard waste and wood waste. This doesn't include blacktop or concrete rubble, but 13,300 tons of waste have come in. Of that, just shy of 5,400 tons is generated by the city of Hutch, whether that be residents, landscapers, contractors, or the street department, Public Works' leaf vacuuming program. And then just down here further below, it just kind of gives you more of a breakdown on where some of our other larger sources of material are coming from. The city of Hutch supplies about 41% of our incoming materials in the Cloud County municipal sites located in all the other cities within the county. Comes in at 16%, city of St. Cloud, 28%. We started working with the city of Maple Grove this year. That accounted for 11%, and then also started with the city of Sartell, bringing in about 4% of our total materials. So once all this material is brought in, processed, finished out, and deemed a sellable finished product, the majority of it gets put into bags. We do some bulk sales, more so locally. We really don't tap into the bulk market in the metro just because of logistics. We can't compete in terms of freight. So the majority of what we produce does go into bags. So looking at 2022 here, we finished out at just shy of 1.4 million bags, down from just shy of 1.6 million bags in 21, and down even further yet of the just over 1.6 in 2020. This is a clear indicator, as is seen in many industries. I think the liquor store is another good example. The liquor industry is the pandemic and how it affected this industry. So seeing our sales decrease into 2022 wasn't something that comes as a surprise. I want to say it was expected. Obviously, we wanted to still be at that 1.5, 1.6 mil, but it didn't come as a surprise. Pretty standard industry-wide, nationwide, is right around June, right after the tail end of the spring season, sales has dropped, tanked off completely. And I think a lot of that just has to do with the official, unofficial end of the pandemic. You know, summertime, we actually had decent weather in this region. It was dry, hot all summer. So I think quite a few people got turned off from spending all the time at home landscaping that they wanted to get back to what their normal life used to be.
Say, Andy, for those that are maybe new to this, can you explain why we went from 2.5
Yes,
million
thanks. I was going to point that out. So from approximately 2010 through 2015, we worked with a company based out of Cleveland, Ohio, that held the bag sales business to two big box stores chains here in this region. Actually, they held the contract nationwide, but long or the short is they didn't have a packaging facility in this region, so they reached out to us, and we started out on a much smaller scale. But as we ramped up to 2015, of that 2.5 million bags, we were packaging basically a half of that was for the customer, leaving the other remaining half of our own products. So as things kind of go with big box, it's low margin. And we finally, for lack of better words, finally woke up and smelled the roses that this isn't worth turning all these wheels and trying to procure all this material to essentially help a competitor out. I mean, thankfully, even to this day, they still hold the business in this region, but they're focusing on the big box, whereas the Creekside customers are more so on the independents and smaller garden centers. So we really haven't crossed paths with them since. Just a little bit of a breakdown, kind of going back to the what's considered co-packing bagging for other customers. Just looking at 22, we have we still do co-pack for some more local metro-based companies, businesses. So 10% of our bag sales is accounted for in the co-packing, whereas the remaining 90% to 1.25 million is in our own Creekside brands, the Splendor Grove, Creekside, and Wonder Blend. So compost fund as a whole actually turned out really well for the year, all considering. I mean, to start out, it wasn't a bad year to begin with, but considering we did see a decrease in bag sales from the previous years, we did surpass our budgeted amount. What did we do there? $225,000, $230,000, coming in at a little over $3 million. So year-end expenditures are pretty much right on par with what was budgeted, leaving us with a net loss of just over $24,000. So there too, the depreciation, capital transfer are all included in those year-end expenditures. You back out the depreciation, cash flowed $250,000 for 2022 at this point. There still are a handful of straggling expenses that are trickling in here yet, but these numbers should be relatively close. I do have our gross profit margin highlighted there in red, coming in at 30.4% for 22. Looking over to the far right, 2021 actuals were at 36.7%. So that is definitely an area of focus here moving forward. I mean, I believe we're not the only industry, we're not the only business, the only manufacturer that's competing with rising costs, but that is something that we will absolutely keep our finger on to mitigate to the best of our ability. Then just again point out the transfer out $120,000 was transferred here to the general fund, up $10,000 from 2021, and since 2009, a little over $1.3 million has been transferred to the general fund. So just a mile-high recap of both funds and some mentionables, as I alluded to. The MPCA grant project started in May on the Curbside Organics program. Bag sales decreased by approximately 12%, while the bagged sale, that should say bagged revenue, decreased by only 6%. Margins starting to decrease, as I mentioned. We did have Bitcoin available last year, which accounted for approximately $200,000 worth of sales revenue. Unfortunately, we sold out. We don't have Bitcoin available for this year, so it'll be interesting to really see how our bag sales pans out here for this year with basically with the loss of, or not, shouldn't say the loss, but not having Bitcoin available to help make up some ground. And then finally, just several minor capital improvement projects taking place along with the delivery of a new wheel loader. Looking ahead to 23 here, finally, you'd be able to construct and implement the new composting system and equipment for the SSOM. After a year and a half of anxiously, impatiently waiting on the MPCA, we were finally issued our permit here on January 11th. So we have the all clear to go ahead and start on that project, or at least start the design work. It'll be interesting to see where final costs do come in on that, considering the current economic environment. Again, just a continuation of that outreach campaign for the curbside program. Expected to last it will last into the spring of 2025. As I noted, public outreach and education coordinator position will be added here, hopefully this quarter of 23, to really spearhead the responsibilities of the public outreach. Another thing we'll be working on is the transition of staffing agency employees to city employees. For many years, Creekside utilized local staffing agencies to hire more so seasonal positions, just because the nature of our industry was seasonal. But as time has gone on, these positions have more or less become full-time, where they're staffed year-round. Well, in the recent years, the billable rates that we get charged above the employees' wages have also crept up an hour, to the point that we can offer these employees full-time benefits, full package, and still come in cheaper than what we're paying these staffing agencies. So we will be looking at moving into that here relatively soon, in the first or second quarter here of this year. And then lastly, just more or less continue to strive to manage costs and maintain future competitiveness, as well as healthy margins as we enter economic uncertainty. So That's what I have. Any questions, comments?
Andy, you want to describe what Bitcom is so the public
Sure.
knows?
Yep. So the Creekside, as I mentioned, we accept concrete and blacktop rubble from whether it be street projects, contractors, private, residential. Stockpile the material, and when we get large enough volume, then we'll hire a crushing company to come in, crush the material into a Class 5 aggregate, which, you know, they do their best with a blend of the concrete and blacktop, but it's really been a high commodity here in the last 5, maybe not quite 10 years, but as I mentioned earlier, our last crushing event would have been the fall of 21, and we sold out by August of 22. That was 20,000 tons, I believe we crushed. So it doesn't last long. Yeah.
So it seems like it's like every other year we have to accumulate enough to make
Yes.
it worthwhile to get.
Yeah, that's one of the
why
downs.
it's like 1 year off and then next year.
Yeah, unfortunately it works that way, just more or less because of the mobilization expenses of the crushing contractor. You know, just for easy numbers, it's $10,000. Well, you know, if you're only going to crush 10,000 ton, $1 a ton goes to.
Yeah.
And then if you do 30,000 ton, you're down to 33 cents a ton. So it's more or less just a math equation, yeah, to try to keep it competitive, to keep the material moving and not outprice ourselves.
Anything else for Andy? Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Andy.
Thank you.
We have no unfinished business, new business, first reading of ordinance number 23-837, ordinance granting franchise renewal to Citizens Bank and Trust Company.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As you mentioned, for your consideration tonight is the granting of the franchise agreement to Citizens Bank. And actually, this is a franchise agreement that's already in effect. See me now.
There somewhere.
So back in 2003, the City Council had granted a franchise agreement to Citizens Bank for the construction of their awning. I'll give it a twist.
And twist the, is that twist?
Oh.
This way? This thing isn't good.
If I had my van here, I'd bring a hammer in. Okay,
There you go.
got it. Thanks.
I'm not sure right now.
Oh, there you go, part of it.
Close. Good enough.
That's all right. We all know what the bank looks like.
Yeah, you get the general idea of where it is. There was the drawing that was included in your packet, but I just wanted you to see this picture basically so you all have an idea of what it looks like. It's on First Avenue Southwest. And the city right away basically extends to the wall of the building. So all of the awning and the pillars are in the city right away. So back in 2003, the city granted Citizens Bank the franchise to occupy the city right away in that area. The franchise was good for 20 years. It's coming up to expire here in February of 2023. The bank has asked the city to renew the franchise. The renewal of the franchise is allowed under our city charter, but it has to go through the same process as when it was initially granted, and that is an ordinance has to be passed by the city council for 2 readings, and there also has to be a public hearing to obtain any public comment regarding the proposed franchise. The franchise agreement is what I would call a standard agreement. The most important part is it requires the bank to have insurance to protect the city, and also has a provision that they have to indemnify the city and any of its officers in case someone should be hurt in the franchise area or any property damage, things of that nature. So I'd be asking for you to approve this first reading of this franchise agreement and set the second reading and a public hearing for our February 14th meeting. If you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer those.
So would it be for another 20 years, Mark?
That's correct.
Okay. And that's the limit? is 20 years.
It is.
Motion to approve ordinance number 23-837.
I'll second.
Motion by Pat, second by Tim to approve the first reading. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carry. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Adopting legislative priorities for 2023.
Mayor and Council, probably, maybe going back 5 years now, this board has, at least on an annual basis, generally towards the beginning, obviously we had an early start to the legislative session, try to set at least some priorities that we can then use as a communication tool to our elected officials at the state. Some of these actually have been on there probably for years or a couple of years, and some of them more recently, and I would say are maybe a little bit more important to us, or we've identified it being a little bit more important. Those are the ones that I've kind of highlighted in yellow. But I guess what I want to do is get that in front of the council to see if there's any thoughts, if you had any questions, if you wanted to add any more, take anything off. And if not, I'd ask you to consider adopting those priorities, and then we'll send those out to our legislators. I think, we've had some good feedback from them in the past, where at least they kind of know maybe where we stand on some of the stuff, and it does provide some communication where I have gotten calls about, hey, this issue is in front of us. What's your thought? Are you guys still in favor of this, still supportive of this, or whatnot? So yeah, some of them are general in nature, and some of them are more specific. We've received $3 million in the past for funding to improve our Lakes River Basin, and we still, I think, identified another $18 million in projects. So we'll continue to try to go and get additional funding for that. We've got, I think there's a bill that's out there, or there's hopes to be a bill out there to get funding for the HATS facility. A couple of you that were on the council a couple of years ago, remember when the Civil Air Patrol came here? They're doing a project right now. They had plans for a lot bigger project, but I think as costs increased, they didn't have the funding for it, and so they're going to state for additional funding on that as well. And so those are some of the things that we've highlighted. Some of them are things that we've maybe dealt with in the past, but wanted to get these at least in front of the council for your consideration. And if you're comfortable with it, ask that you consider adopting it.
I went through it a couple times and it all looked good, and especially the things that you're adding to it, and Civil Air Patrol and the water basin. That's all things that we've talked about this past year, and good additions, and look good to me.
Have you heard any rumblings on the size of the bonding bill that they're gonna put together?
I haven't. I don't know if they've gotten to that point yet. I haven't heard anything about size. I think we did have a call, John, didn't we have a call from one of our legislatures asking about the HATS facility? Which makes me believe they're having conversations already about it.
Yes, that was Representative Gilman, and she had called about that, and so I provided her with some information. I haven't heard back if she's got any questions about what's going on. But we did have a updated budget for the HATS bonding request, and that's roughly a third. In the idea is a third each from the county, from the city, from the state. Well, the state did it through their own little process, right? So they have a different process for MnDOT. And so, and what we ended up needing to do was kind of square the budget up to match what MnDOT's request was. So we updated that and sent that off. But yeah, she's got the information. I just was able to send it here a little bit ago. And
so that leads me to believe they're at least starting conversations, but I don't think they've come out with anything.
I haven't heard anything more than that. I signed up for so I get the notices of what they're meeting on. Up to date, they haven't met on any of the bonding lists that was offered up last year. So.
Well, she's on the ball. She just got sworn in.
Yeah, yeah, it was good to hear. So.
They won't show their cards till towards the end anyway.
Oh yeah, like I said, the process has just started. So.
Entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Pat, second by Chad to approve the priorities for 2023. Any other discussion?
Somewhat related, like, in the past, Matt, we've met with our legislators. Do we want to do that in the?
Yes, and that was one, we've actually had some conversations with staff. I wanted to get this approved because then when I send this out, part of my email is gonna be, what we'd like to meet with you, especially because I think we've got 3 big projects here in town that are potential, from the HATS facility to the Civil Air Patrol to our Lakes River Basin study, and especially now with Representative Gilman being new. And I guess that's really it. Obviously, Senator Gruenhagen has some experience, I know, and he's been helpful with us on some of those projects in the past, but it would be good just to kind of get them in here, to sit down with them, to meet with them face to face, because it's been a while since we've done that, to do that. So yeah, that's going to be one of our goals, is try to get them to come out. Sometimes that might be like a Saturday. So, I might have to meet with them on a Saturday morning or something, but. So.
As the new kid on the block, can I ask the question of, does the council sit down with the mayor and staff and look through these and kind of formulate these, or are these more staff-driven?
Most of these have been staffed, council's always, we've asked for feedback from the council in the past. And so this is just one step, and there's nothing that says we can't add to it. I would say most of this is coming from staff. So
If you want something added to it, Tim, you're surely.
Well, I think I'm more looking in the future right now. I've read through these, and a lot of them make sense, but there was, you look at, okay, is there input we could have made into it? And there are, but legislatively, when you're dealing with legislators, it's so much current issues that, having because it's half of these could be even off their agenda.
Yeah.
But it's forming a strategy to say, how would the city approach this? And we say, okay, local control, how do we approach that right now? Because we see that dissipating, and we see the local funding dissipating. Is that how do we prioritize these? And, we talk to the residents, or are supposed to be talking to the residents. That also helps with the input and feedback from our residents. But thank you for that.
Yep, and I would say moving forward, Tim, obviously now being new, I think you've got this as your kind of baseline, right? I think as we look at it, because we've been doing this now, like I said, on a more consistent basis. But yeah, I know staff would love to have some feedback from the council. As maybe this is too much. Maybe we want to just go, hey, these are the 5 main issues. And I've tried to do that somewhat without kind of highlighting it, because you look at a document that's got 20 issues on it.
That's why I assume the highlighted
Quite a bit. The highlighted ones are the ones that we've kind of said, these are really important for us.
No, thanks for that, and I'd love to be part of that in the future. So,
yep.
Any other discussion? Call a motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Governance minutes, reports from committees, boards, or commissions. We have the Motor Vehicle Department 2022 recap. Public Arts Commission minutes from December 14th, 2022. We have Hutchinson Housing Redevelopment Authority Board minutes from December 20th, 2022. Chief Jefferson, you have anything else? No. John, you got anything else?
No.
Mike, new guy? Nothing?
I told him I was happy he came back for a week too. So
Yeah,
it's a good start, so.
Yeah, that's a good start. Andy, you got anything else for us? Mr. Mark, you have anything?
Nothing else tonight.
Alrighty. Dave, let's start with you.
Why don't we?
Okay. You're up.
No, I don't have anything actually. I
Okay.
think, just listening to the lady talk, I hope there's a solution for her, dilemma, and like maybe some other ones too, so. I can only wish for that, if that can happen, so.
Well, considering how many miles of snow we
Yeah, I
have to
understand
remove in this town, I mean, sure, I know, John and I think Matt both was in contact with her, so hopefully we'll get something worked out for her, so. All right, thanks, Dave. Pat?
Nothing.
Alrighty, Chad?
An extra.
Tim?
Thank you to all the staff who have helped with the processing to get this flowing. Library board meeting was yesterday and a strong group of people. And so, things are functioning and I appreciate the welcomes and, the invitations and get to know. So thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Matt?
Just one reminder, this is more for Tim and Gary. We do have union mediation on Thursday at 9. So they'll be
On
here
the
at
agenda.
City Center. So.
Union negotiation. Is that here?
Yep, it'll be right here. So, yep. Otherwise, that's it for me. So.
Alrighty, all I have is, thanks to the people that adopted a fire hydrant.
Yes.
I do see some that are still covered, so if you can look around your neighborhood and help out, I'd greatly appreciate that. And I'm sure the firemen would too if they get a call in your neighborhood. Otherwise, let's go home and enjoy the family.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Pat, second by Chad to adjourn. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried.